Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. I'm excited that you and all of your parts have taken time to be with me and all of my parts. If you are a coach, a client, a therapist, if you are in business or education, and you're curious about the IFS model, you are in the right place. Now, let's see what happens on today's podcast. Hey everyone. On today's podcast, I speak with Nydia Guity. I wasn't sure if I was going to get another episode in to honor Minority Mental Health Month, but Duran hooked me up with Nydia, and here we go. I'm super excited to bring this to you, our final episode for the series. Nydia is an IFS therapist. She's a fellow podcaster. She's a writer, and she's a natural hair enthusiast. And you might not know what that is, but you will find out. I do want to give a shout out for her podcast. It's called Naturally Ever After, and I loved it. She has 8 episodes, and I listened to every single one of them, and I thought they were fun, and it felt like you were talking to a friend, which I hope happens when you're listening to mine. But when I was listening to hers, I was like, and it was before I met her. I was like, oh my gosh, I really, really like her. And I just really loved her podcast. So definitely take a listen to that. So there's a part of me that says, I had no idea that Nydia says the emotional baggage that comes with hair. And so there's a part of me that says I had no idea. And there's another part of me that's like, really? Because the more I was listening to her podcasts, all of these memories kept popping up. But we also talk about our moms. So sort of it's so interesting about moms and hair. And like, wow, I'm wondering how many of you listeners have a hair story. And I'm wondering how many of you have a hair story that involves your mother. Because I do, and I didn't realize I did. And Nydia does, and she shares it with us. And I loved her vulnerability and her openness. And she really just shares her story. And I felt like we just had a really good connection. And so I have to say, I ask a lot of like dumb white girl questions. And as I was editing this, I was like, man, I've got to clean this up. I've got to delete some of this because I just don't want to sound stupid. But I didn't, so I left them in there. So I had definitely had a critical part up. So I'm just going to speak for that critical part that just was like, you got to edit that out. And I decided not to. So it's in there. So I thought it was a really fun episode. I hope you like it too. I will see you in August for our special guest. And then, of course, I hope to see you back here in September. Hope everyone's doing well. Have a good rest of your summer. Enjoy this one.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Tammy?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this. Okay, so you have 2 podcasts. I only found your one, which I actually loved, the one you did by yourself. I thought it was great. I thought it was
Thank you.
interesting. Even as a white girl, I was like, I could relate. I know it's different. I know our hair is different, but I could so relate. Honestly, I could relate to it. So, and I really liked it. So I think
Thank you.
the way you're speaking is, I felt really connected to. So
Thank you. And for me, that's the goal. I think that hair for Black women is a thing, but I also feel like hair in general, depending on the group of people that we're talking to, is not just mutually exclusive to Black people. I'm speaking to Black women because that's my experience, but
right.
my hope is that when my audience grows, that this also appeals to women that identify as biracial, or women, let's say, who are white, who are married to someone else that's not white.
Right.
Because then we have a new generation of children that are being born to multiracial families, and the question still comes up, like, how do I do this?
Yeah. Because we don't even know how. I wouldn't have a clue how to do a Black girl's hair. Like if I was like, I know how to braid my hair, but it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So before we get into that, because I totally want to, tell me where you are, and if you were to look out a window, what would you see?
I am in my living room, and I'm looking out my little patio space, and I'm looking at my hammock. So I just got that for my birthday.
Nice.
In June. And since this quarantine happened, and it took a really long time to get it because I guess everybody's home now and everyone is buying everything on the internet. So it took forever and a day to, number one, find a hammock, and number two, finally have it delivered. I think I ordered a hammock from other websites like 3-4 times, and they kept getting canceled. I didn't know that was possible.
Oh
You can
my
order
gosh.
something, they keep canceling it. And I'm like, take my money. I just want a hammock.
Yeah, yeah.
Finally, I found one, and it's been by far one of the best purchases that I've made in 2020.
I love it. We vacation in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and we have a Nag's Head hammock. That's like a thing.
Mm,
Nag's Head Hammocks is a big company down there. So,
hmm.
but we've had it for a couple years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I love
love
it.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a hammock, and then we have what we use more though is we have a seat on our screen and porch that's like a
Mm,
swing that we sit in all the
mm.
time. Yeah.
I think that sitting outside is so therapeutic,
Yeah, me too.
especially now that we're like so limited in going outside. And it's like, wear your mask. I like to just be outside without it. And this is like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
thankful that I have this outdoor space and I have two plants. My friend Nicole helped me name one of them. So it's Gertrude is the lychee plant. And Co-Green 19 is this other pineapple looking plant I have. I don't even know what
Oh.
kind of plant it is, but that's what I'm looking at right now. My hammock and my two plants.
That sounds great. Well, pineapple plant sounds tropical, which sounds lovely. I know, thank God. I mean, I thought about that too. Like, we pretty much live in the woods, but we traveled one day when this whole thing started, and we were just drove up for an hour to see this. It was like somebody's birthday, like one of those like drive by. It was like a little
Mm-hmm.
2-year-old's birthday, and we like, so let's just get
Oh.
out of here and drive. I know. So like we were all just like yelling out the window, "Happy birthday" to this little guy, and but we kept passing these apartment buildings, and I was like, how are people surviving? There's no. You walk out your apartment and you're in the city. They don't have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know how people are doing it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's hard, and it's still going. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And you're in Atlanta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How's the vibe in Atlanta? Like, how are your numbers?
Um,
How's all that going?
I don't really touch base with the numbers. I try to minimize how often I watch the news because it's just so depressing.
Yeah.
Even if I don't turn on the TV, like we all have our cell phones. And even then, I try to minimize like the news app, turn all the notifications off. And I just try to be mindful about washing my hands, wearing my mask if I'm in big public spaces. Like this morning, I went out for a run. But early in the morning, there's really not a lot of people out. But even then, I'm still conscious about like social distancing and space.
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't really watch the news and keep up with the numbers. I feel like the most recently when I did was when I traveled to New York to see my mom. It was earlier in the month, and I was my anxious part was up when I was in New
Yeah.
York.
Yeah, of
Everything
course.
about being there was not emotionally comfortable for me. I've moved to Atlanta in September of 2015. So I feel like I'm becoming accustomed to just Southern living. So anytime that I go back to New York, I'm just like, you people are too close to me. Like I need to be able to spread my arms out. And if I hit you, that means you're too close.
But you grew up that way, right? You grew
I
up in New York.
did. I did. And I feel like my first experience noticing that there's life outside of New York was when I went to undergrad. I went to undergrad at the University of Vermont. And as an 18-year-old, first time not living in a state where I didn't grow up, I'm just like, what is this?
Well, and Vermont. I mean, that's a big change to go from New York City,
Massive,
right? Yeah.
massive.
Yeah. Yeah. And were
Huge
you
culture shock.
yeah, and as a woman of color, do you like women of color or do you like black women?
I
What
like
would you
black.
prefer? Black, okay.
Yeah, black.
So as a black woman, you had to be a minority in Vermont.
Oh,
Oh
absolutely.
my gosh.
Absolutely. The story of how I got there is like the most hilarious to me because my college counselor suggested that I apply to UVM because my SAT score sucked. My grades were good. I had good recommendation letters, but as far as standardized testing, I am one of the people that will take the test over and over and over
Aw.
and over. And one of the things that I've learned in, just life is that standardized testing doesn't measure intelligence. It just measures whether or not you can do something at a period of time. And um, I used to feel bad about not getting it right the first time. Now it's just like, look, I'll eventually pass. I just need to get to this point. but she recommended that I apply to UVM, and I'm just like, okay, fine, I did it. And then when it came down to picking a school, I was just like, this school can't seriously be a real option. And it was, because I got a full scholarship, a full academic
Wow.
scholarship, right, for my first year. And the school that I wanted to go to, Howard University, I didn't even get accepted. So it came down to two schools, and UVM was the best fit. But I went there kicking and screaming. I was just
Yeah,
like,
because
I'm going to
Howard
transfer out.
is more of a black school, right? I'm from
Right. It's
Maryland,
a
so I'm familiar with
historically,
that. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's a HBCU. And that's
You're
where I
like
wanted to go.
Howard or Vermont?
Life had other plans because Howard didn't work.
So you went to Vermont and you're like, I can't believe I'm going to Vermont. And
I could
then,
not believe it.
yeah, yeah. And then how was your experience there as a black woman?
The first 2 years, I hated it.
Hmm.
I hated, like, my first semester was rough. It
Hmm.
was really, really rough. I remember when I was like leading up to college, my mom and I'm the oldest of five. We would always get into it. And I'm just like, I can't wait to go to college so that I can get away from you. And then college came and she dropped me off my first semester. Tammy, I kid you not. When she came to drop me off, she took me to the supermarket. She bought me like all this stuff that I needed for my dorm. And then we took a cab to the airport, and she like prayed over me, and she goes, you made it to this point, I'm always available to you, but this is, I'm not here now. So I need
Oh,
you to be an adult and take care of yourself. And I'm trusting you, like, use everything that I've taught you to this point. And I'm just like, don't leave me here.
she's like, God's gonna be with you. God's gonna be with me. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that had to be so hard for both of you.
I sobbed for hours when she left. And my roommate, bless her heart, because I'm thinking back, and I'm remembering my 18-year-old self. She's not mature, not emotionally mature. She's in a state by herself. She didn't go to UVM with any friends, because that's another thing. Usually kids,
Yeah.
go to certain schools in clumps. I didn't go to UVM with any of my friends. I don't have family nearby. I've never been to Vermont, and my mom just left me. I feel abandoned.
Yeah, I love my mom left me.
After all these years of me saying, I can't wait to go to college so that I can get away from you.
Yeah, yeah. She left me there. Oh. And so what happened that you ended up getting more comfortable?
So I want to say, like, the first month, like the first 2 months, I'm like, okay, I have to make this work. Cause I'm not, for me, I knew then, and I feel like this is a part of me, that's the ambitious part of me, that's like, look, we're going to have to just make the best out of this, because to not be in college isn't an option.
Hmm.
I knew that. To not be in college wasn't an option. And I even thought about it, like, maybe I can take a semester off. Maybe I can, do well this semester and then transfer. If you know anything about my mother, if you present an option to her about not being in college, it needs to be set in stone, and you need to have a plan. So for me to come
Okay.
back home was not an option. And I remember October of 2005, it started snowing. This is before Halloween. I'm like, what is this? I'm a tropical girl. Granted, I was born in New York. My family's from Honduras. I love the warm weather. Why is it
Yeah.
snowing before Halloween?
Yeah. It's awful. Yeah. What is that? Yeah. And it's going to keep snowing until
Right,
May.
right, right. And I called her. I was like, ma'am, I can't do this. She's like, you need to figure it out.
Now, did your mom go to college?
No, she did not.
Okay. So was that part of it was like, I didn't go to college, so you five kids,
Right,
you're going. Okay.
right. And college was drilled early on.
Okay.
College was drilled early on. My mom, her dream was to go to school and practice medicine. So, I mean, and it switches, because sometimes she says, I want to be a nurse. I wanted to be a nurse. And the other time she says, I really wanted to be a judge. And she's like, I just wanted to have more options. And unfortunately, that wasn't available to me in the way that I needed when I was younger, or even when I was older. Like, to come to a country where you don't speak the language, it takes time for you to get to a space where higher education becomes even an option. And then
Right.
support.
Right.
Support is really, really big. So my mom used to say, she was a home health aide. And she's like, I'm not ashamed of what I do, but there's no reason for you and I to have the same job when you have the world available to you.
Right. And she probably worked really hard to make that possible for you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when, so going back to the college counselor, when I needed her W-2s to file for financial aid, and I'm looking at how much my mom makes, I'm like, how the hell are you supporting 5 kids on this? And I had no idea. I had no
Wow.
idea that we didn't have money like that. I always felt like, I always had what I needed. My parents both worked hard. For the most part, things were good. And then I'm getting ready to go to college and I'm just like, can we afford this? Like, but I knew I had to go. Even if
Wow.
it wasn't UVM, I knew I was going to college and I knew I was going to graduate.
Wow. So was your mom from Honduras?
Yeah, both of
Okay.
my parents are from Honduras. Yep.
Okay. Okay. And did they move here when they were little, or what's the
No,
story
my
there?
dad came to the United States, I want to say like in his mid 30s, no, early to mid 30s. And then my mom came here in her early 20s.
Okay. Okay. Did
Yeah.
they meet here?
No, they're actually from the same town in Honduras. My dad is 12 years older than my mom.
Okay.
So there's a gap there. But they kind of like grew up together, but like in a different age group. And then when they both reconnected here, then a few years later I came along.
So,
Just strolled in.
yeah, hey. And then do all five, so you have four siblings. Did they
hmm
all go to college?
So I'm the oldest, the ones of age, yes. So
Okay.
my sister, she went to Jacksonville State University, and my brother went to Monroe College. And then the two younger ones are a set of twins. Dennis goes to SUNY Cobleskill in New York, and then Denise has a developmental disability, so she's not in college, but she's still like in those like adult day programs, or like I
Gotcha.
think it's like the like after high school, but not really college like that.
Yeah, yeah. So, education must have been really important to your family.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm. I want to somehow shift weirdly
hmm
into talking about natural hair because I listened to one of your podcasts and you talked about how when you were at UVM, how everyone was coming into your dorm and you were doing everyone's hair.
And I think that's the sauce of like going to a predominantly white university and not having a lot of black people around and needing your hair done while you're at school, because like there was this one salon in the Burlington area called Diversity, and I remember when I hated that name, side note. There was that one salon, and I remember saying like, I need to get my hair done. I don't want to be the one to always do it. Like, what's around? And it's like nothing. People
Right.
were flying back to New York or going to Boston to get their hair braided or their hair done, and then going back to Burlington. And I'm like, okay, I know how to braid. I know how to do, hairstyles at a minimum to kind of hold me over before I go back home. I'm not going to buy a plane ticket as a college student. I'm not buying a plane ticket to go get my hair done.
Right.
Now I can do that,
Right.
years later,
Right.
but before I couldn't. So I
That
always
still
knew how to
seems
braid.
ridiculous to me. That seems ridiculous because one of the things that you said was, I can't walk in a Walgreens and get hair dye. And I thought, wow, that's another like white privilege thing that I've never
Right,
thought about. Like I can
right.
walk into any store and buy hair dye and dye
Yeah,
my hair.
not an option. Not an option. I'm like side eyeing everything. Like, is this for me? Who's endorsing this? Because if I know for the most part, my experience then, and we're talking about like 2007. Yeah, 2007 is when I stopped relaxing my hair. So for the most part, I was able to use whatever was available. But the moment I started relaxing my hair, like the game completely changed. Like what I used to be able to use no longer
Really?
works. So here
Okay.
I am either mixing my own conditioners to kind of moisturize my hair, just experimenting, or buying more expensive products that work for my hair. Then I feel like now more natural hair products are accessible and more common, but before they weren't. So
So
the
was
price
that,
range was a lot higher.
oh, okay, okay. So is that kind of what happened though? You were like, you didn't really decide to go natural. It was more like, I have to because I'm in Vermont. I'm not flying back to New York. So let's figure this out.
No, I decided Vermont kind of just, I think that being in Vermont was more of a motivation to do it,
Okay.
because I've always wondered like what my hair would look like if I didn't have a relaxer. Since I can remember, I've always been like fascinated by afros and like big hair and wanting my hair to look like that. But I've always had a relaxer since I can remember.
Tell us white people what you're talking about.
us white people. So my hair,
I mean, my mom gave me perms, but I know it's not the same thing. Like my mom would give me perms in middle
mm-hmm,
school in our kitchen because it was
mm-hmm,
like the 80s and she would
mm-hmm,
give me perms, but I know that's not the same thing.
mm-hmm. So a relaxer is to chemically straighten your hair. And
Okay.
for Black people that have kinky to curly hair textures, the relaxer just makes it bone straight. So the way that your hair is, that's what a relaxer will do to my hair if I were to go back to getting a relaxer. So initially my mom used to hot comb my hair, and it's like a iron comb that you sit on the stove and you let it cool off a little bit, and then you go from root to end, and just envision like an afro going from like really really puffy to like straight.
Straight. Okay. And she would start
Mm-hmm.
doing that to you when you were little. Like that was
Yeah,
something they would do.
yeah,
Okay.
like
All right.
5. Like age
Wow.
5, I was getting
Okay.
that. And my mom is not a hairstylist, so I would get scabs. I would hear the sizzle. It's like kind of cooking a little bit. Sometimes it
Yeah.
came out nice, other times it didn't, but it still came out straight where my hair wasn't puffy.
And so and I think this is one of your points is there's is it, would you say a stigma around even when you were little not having puffy afro hair even as a
I
little
mean, for
girl?
me, that was the message. It was
Yeah.
like, we need you to look put together. You look nice when your hair is straight, and you don't look nice when your hair is big. And but I always like big hair, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I want it to be big. I want it to be big, and I think that going to UVM, although I went there kicking and screaming, ended up being a big blessing in disguise because I finally got to do what I wanted. Now,
Mm.
knowing how to do it, I think became like the homework assignment. Even now that I'm still learning years later, like, okay, now that I'm here, how do I maintain this? Now that I'm here, how do I also teach this skill to other people? Because it's not just um, knowing what products to use. Emotionally, that process was rough.
Yeah. Tell me about
It
that.
was very rough. Well, I would say my biggest critic was my mom.
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm not sure that she even learned how to do her natural hair, because like since I can remember, my mom has had a jerry curl.
Mm.
And I think of like the 80s, because in essence it's a perm. It's a perm where they loosen your curl and then kind of just like make it more manageable, whatever that means, but
Okay.
chemically. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So it's almost like it's like the white girl perm, but it is softer and
Right.
looser. Okay.
Right.
And then how often does she have to do that?
Um, I would say kind of like a relaxer. So I used to get relaxers every 6 weeks. So I will guesstimate and say like quarterly. And
Okay.
I could be
Okay.
wrong. I could
Okay.
be
And then once she's done that, then her hair looks like it stays that way, right? Your hair
right.
stays that way.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So your mom's been doing that for probably forever, like putting that on her
I'm
hair and
33.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then when you were like, you know what, I'm not putting any relaxer in my hair. I'm just going to let my hair grow and let's see what happens. How
Mm-hmm.
did your mom take that?
I don't think that she did. Like, she was very vocal about how she didn't like how it looked. She was very
Mm,
vocal about how I didn't look good, and that, I needed a relaxer, and I just kept ignoring her, because one of the things, and I feel like I'm so thankful for my younger self for being like just so courageous to still do what she wants,
yeah.
even when people are not supportive, because I was just like, well, you don't have the goal that I'm going towards. You don't have the big afro. The person
Mm,
that does is not telling me this, and that's who I'm listening to right now. So it's like,
right.
okay,
Right.
fine, you don't have to like it. Well, if you don't like it, don't look.
Right, but thinking about like right my 18, 19-year-old self, like had to be really hard to stand up to
It
your mom
was.
that way.
It was, because I think that as women and little girls, like, you want the approval of your mom.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
do. I've never wanted to disappoint her. I've never wanted her to be upset with me. And I think that even in adulthood, learning that we can respectfully disagree, and you're not going to always like my decisions. It's important to me that you respect them. But if you don't, then these are the boundaries and the parameters that I'm putting in place to protect myself, because it's not healthy for me to keep taking these blows
Yeah.
over and over and over because you're not comfortable with something. She
That is
likes my
hard.
hair now.
Oh, good. I'm like that. I don't know that we ever So I'm like in my late 40s.
Hmm.
I don't know. I mean, are we ever going to get over that with our moms? I don't know. I
I
feel like
don't
I'm
think
going to be
so.
like
I feel like
70
it
and still
looks
have these
different.
mom issues.
Yeah, I think that it looks different as you get older because, like, the issues that I had with her before or early on are not the same ones that I have now. And it's not to say that conflict is a bad thing. I think that we approach it a lot different. And over the years, I feel like my mom now knows how to speak to me
Mm,
because she knows how I'm going to respond if and when I start to feel comfortable about something.
yeah.
There's conversations that I am able to have with my mom, and I think it's just a generational difference. And then there's other things that are just never going to happen. Like, we're never going to have a family therapy session together. I need to let that idea go.
No.
These are just things that are never going to happen. And it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay because our generation believes in, like, open communication and all this family stuff. My mom, the way that she grew up and what she understands to be a mother-daughter relationship is very different from what I hope to have with my daughter if and when I have her or them.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So has your mom gotten more used to I want to have natural hair and I want these products and here's what, can you have those conversations with her now?
Oh, absolutely. So Denise is my younger sister, and she's the one that's home with my mom, the one that I mentioned that has a
Yep.
developmental disability. And my little sister has never had a relaxer. So to see me at 5 years old having my hair hot comb and then relax from age like 6 to about 21 to now
Mm,
my sister, who's going to be 19 next month, she's never had a relaxer, shows my mom's progression, and I would say evolution with, like, looking at what hair is and what it is now, or what hair
yeah.
was then to what it is now.
Yeah. And the culture, is it pressure or messages of how our hair should look or the, what we should, tell me about that sort of this message of a Black woman, this is what you're supposed to look like and how
I,
that's
I would
changed.
I would say for my mom is messaging. I don't know that and this is probably a great conversation to have with her. I don't know that it was ever, I don't like my hair. This is just what I was taught, so this is what I do.
Yeah.
And you kind of just go with the flow. Like, it's
Right.
not, I think that with most people, whenever I think of like maladaptive behaviors, no one ever plans to do that. Someone taught you that. And then unless someone questions it, you don't stop doing it. You just do
Right.
it.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think that my mom questioned it as much. It was taught to her, and it's just something that she did until I questioned it. It's like, well, why am I doing this? Number one, I hate how it smells. I
Mm.
don't like scabs on my scalp. I
Yeah.
don't like going to the salon and waiting hours. I hate sitting under the dryer. I
Mm.
hate having my hair blow dried with all this smoke all over the place. I just want to wash my hair, maybe braid it, and I want my hair to be big and healthy. And sometimes once in a while, like when I get my trims either quarterly, depending how often I put heat in my hair, or at least twice a year, is when I will straighten it. But outside of that, and when I say straighten it now, I mean like flat iron it. I don't chemically straighten my hair anymore.
Okay.
But outside of that, like, I like my hair as it.
Did you move from Vermont to Atlanta?
No, I
No.
moved back home to New York. So after graduating, this was in 2009, I moved back to New York and I was working, went to grad school, licensing, because I'm a licensed clinical social worker by profession. So all of that happened in New York. And then I moved to Atlanta in 2015.
Okay. And how's the hair story there? Like, what's the feel there? Do you have pushback about your hair now now that you're in Atlanta?
No, I would say like Atlanta to me is like the mecca of like Black culture in the
Yeah.
United States. So like there's an abundance of like just hairstylists and places that I can go and hair products that I can buy. Um, I like my personal hairstylist, and she's in New York. So with the quarantine, like, it's not really an option to fly back home right now just to get a nice trim and, like, just be home for a few days.
Yeah.
But I can do that here. It's not an issue.
Right. You have more resources in Atlanta.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. What about self-esteem? Like, I hate the word self-esteem, but what about self-esteem related to your hair as a Black woman?
I would say the ability to just be, like, authentically just be. Because one of the things that I was confused about as a little kid was like, how are you going to say that the thing that grows out of my scalp naturally is bad? Like, what is that saying about me?
Wow.
What is it saying about me that the way that I am with nothing? Because I believe that anything that we do to ourselves is an enhancement. So it's like
Mhm.
going to school to me is like, okay, this now provides me more opportunities to have more access. But let's say that I didn't go to school. That doesn't make me a bad person. It just means that I didn't have access. So like if my natural hair grows and you look at that as bad, so if I do something to it, it's enhancing me. But like without doing it, does that make me not great?
Right. Yeah.
That to me didn't make sense. I was just like side eye.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? Like this doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like I know it's different as a white woman, but I feel like there's some truth to that. I remember my mom's always dyed her hair. So she started dyeing my hair when I was in the sixth grade because it was
Mm-hmm.
always like, oh, I had this awful, well, so I don't even, I want to say this, but this is a critic coming up, that I had this awful, like, light brown, I had like a non-color hair and then it would turn blonde in the summer. And there was always
Mm-hmm.
this message from my mom, you're prettier in the summer because your hair is blonde. She didn't say it
Mm-hmm.
that way, but that was definitely the message.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, in the winter it's darker, therefore you're not pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing quotes. And so then it was like, okay, so then we have to start dyeing your hair because so it's just interesting that like that there's also a hair story. That I
Mm-hmm.
have a hair story.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's
Right.
finding it very interesting. When I listened to your podcast, I was like, "Wow, I've not thought about this as of like,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely have a hair story." And part of my hair story is being mad at my mom and went and lived with my dad when I was like 20, and I cut my hair off.
Mm.
And I hadn't talked to my mom, and I saw her like driving by a gas station and got out of my car, and she was like, "Huh, okay," because I was like, I've also dyed it black. I've dyed it red. So
I feel
parts of
like a
me that
lot of women
rebellious.
have hair stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have hair stories and it looks different. And I think that when I created Naturally Ever After, like the premise behind it was just like, let's address the emotional baggage and issues that come with hair.
Yeah.
That come with hair. I think that for white women it looks different. Like you said, it's not the same as with black women, but it's still there. And I think it's important to highlight the fact that it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I always think it's really interesting. I have a friend, Lydia. Hi, Lydia, if you're listening to this, and she's never dyed her hair. And I'm like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
understand what you're talking about. I don't even understand where you're coming from. What do you mean? And then I want to dye it. So I have someone that dyes my hair now, but for a long time I dyed my own hair. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
do weird, crazy things with it. But I'm like, I want to dye your hair. Let me do it. Um, So can we shift and talk about, and I don't know how to say it. Is it Garifuni culture?
Garifuna.
Yeah, tell me
Garifuna.
about that.
So Garifuna is a mixture of West African, Arawak, and Black Carib. And these are descendants of African slaves or African descendants that were in the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and then they were exiled by the British to Central America. And the Garifuna people spread out through Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, or some parts of Nicaragua and Belize.
Wow. That is so interesting. And so that is where that's where your family's from, or that's where your family's
Mm.
culture is.
Culturally, yes,
Culturally.
culturally.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. And so was that, so tell me about some aspects of that and how that is celebrated for you and how you're honoring that.
I feel like, so being first generation born in the United States and growing up for the most part in the Garifuna community, I never thought about being Garifuna until I wasn't in that space anymore. So I feel like I noticed more. I always knew that there was a difference when I lived in the Bronx because, like, so for the people that are listening to this, like, I'm Black. I'm a brown woman and visibly brown. And but I also speak Spanish, and Spanish was my first language. So like when people look at me, they usually assume that I'm African American, and I'm not. But then I speak Spanish, and then they're curious as to like where I'm from. Like where did you learn to speak Spanish? And it's like at home, like
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And that always came up. So it was like at lunchtime, I think about like the cafeteria, and then like the African American kids are on one side, and then the Spanish kids on the other side, and then I'm in the middle. And then it's just like, well, pick a side. They didn't say pick a side, but it felt like pick a side. So my at
Right.
the time when I was younger, my English wasn't fluent in the way that it is now. So I wasn't really able to communicate with the Black kids, my fellow Black peers. But I also didn't feel comfortable sitting with the Spanish kids because they would talk poorly about the Black kids, and it's just like, you do know I look like them, right? Like it doesn't sit
Wow.
well for me to sit in this space and you say these things and me not say something back. So I feel like as my English got better, I just started hanging out more with the Black kids because I felt like that's who I align with more,
Mm.
even though I understand what's being said about us.
Right. I feel like that is so interesting because it's like we do so just look at people's skin color and then we
Right.
put you in a category. Oh, you're
Right.
you're in this category here. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's so interesting for you growing up, you even immediately were like, I don't fit. Where do I
Mm-hmm.
fit here?
Right. Right. And like I think is it's interesting to me that people, and I'm gonna speak like for the United States because this is where we are. They think of Black people. People in the United States think of Black people as only African American, as if the diaspora of Black people isn't global.
Right.
Just like that there's Black people everywhere, right? There's
Right.
Black people that speak French. There's Black people that speak all of these languages that exist in the continent of Africa. There's people in Central America. There's Black people well, there are Black people in Central America, Black people in Europe. There's Black people everywhere. So truthfully, you don't know where I'm from.
Yeah.
You
I
wouldn't
think
know.
I think some of that is because we're dumb. And but we have good I think in general, we have I'll speak for myself. I think in some ways I'm just dumb about it, and I mean in the nicest way, but I have a good heart. So I'm like, what about you? I want to be polite, I want to be respectful. And back in the day, like I feel like that was what you called Black people. You called Black people African American. So it's like that you don't do that now, but at a time that's what you did. I just want to say in some ways it's like this innocent dumbness.
I would agree with that. I had a roommate who said just that
Oh,
because
good, because
she
I'm
grew up in
saying it and I'm
Vermont.
mumbling and I'm like, I hope this makes sense and I hope I don't sound like a complete idiot.
She grew up in Vermont, and I was her first Black friend. So she was
Mm,
like intrigued by me. Like she wanted to touch my hair. She wanted to know what like skin products I use because it's not one thing. Like if you ever go to my bathroom sink, it's a lot of stuff in there.
yeah,
And she was just like, she just wanted to know so much. And I think that for me, I had to learn, and I don't even know that I was even doing IFS back then, but it was just like, okay, there's a part of me that has a wall. There's a part of me that has anger
yeah,
about having to always explain why I do what I do. And I'm just coming to college because I want to have the regular experience just like everyone else.
right.
But also realizing that I'm not regular and this is not a regular environment that's made for me. So
Yeah,
that like conflicting part, like I just want to be normal, but I stand out so much. And then
right.
for the people that are curious, understanding that the curiosity in some way is innocent, even though in some ways it pains me to have to keep educating all of the
Yes.
time. I don't want to always be on.
Yeah.
So
I
that
think that's great.
polarization was there. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I get your innocence and I get that you're curious, but I'm also effing tired. Like I just want
Yeah.
to do what I do and move on,
Yeah.
and also having some grace for her in some
Yeah.
ways because I've never had to question those things. Like I don't know what it's like to be on the receiving end of being so intrigued by what someone else uses. I'm
Right.
just like, oh, okay, fine. But
You're
that's
like, it's
again
just
not
this
my
thing.
experience. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's getting better, or do you feel like for you and your experience, is it better because you're in Atlanta, or do you feel like that's getting better just as a country, or I don't know, or is that
I
getting
feel like
worse?
it still happens. I don't know that it's getting worse. I feel like it looks different. Um, I feel like if anything has gotten better, I would say it's me and the way that I approach it. And
Yeah.
now having grace for people that don't know and being open to just having those conversations, which is why I started Naturally Ever After, because I think that part of people not having these conversations, I would say, is centered around shame. and feeling like, can I really even ask this question? Like, if I
Yeah.
ask, are you going to get offended? And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I get that you don't know. And when we don't know, we ask questions. Now it's a matter of, well, how do we communicate this in a way that's informative, educational, so that this can be an ongoing conversation? Because for me, it was like, how do people not know this? I mean, I didn't once upon a time.
Right.
I was a rookie even in the natural hair game. And like, what
Mhm.
products do I use? How do I do this? There was the time where I myself didn't know. And I think that extending that grace to people that don't know is the way that we keep this conversation going.
Yeah, yeah. And I completely respect that it's like I feel embarrassed even asking some of these questions that I'm asking you. And I also know that if I don't ask them, then it
Mm-hmm.
keeps us separated.
Right,
Like
right.
it keeps us disconnected if I don't ask.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm also hearing that that's annoying. It's annoying probably for parts of you that are
Mm-hmm.
like generous and gracious and answering the questions, and
Mm-hmm.
then other parts of you are like, well, this is annoying.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I did the level 1 IFS training. This was last year, and someone shared something about equity, and the comment was something along the lines of like, in order for us to have a conversation, well, at the time we are talking about race. Well, I think it's like relevant too, but in order for us to have like an equitable conversation about hair, I think that there's a lot of things white people need to educate themselves about just in general before you start asking all of these questions. Because it feels, for me at the time, it felt like, how do you not know this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
We have the internet.
yeah,
It's not like you have to like pull up an encyclopedia. It's not like you have to, go to the library and do research. I mean, and even then, that form of research was available. But for me, it was just like, how do you not know this?
yeah. Well, it's what's interesting as you're saying that what's coming up for me is, and again, I'm going to say for a part of me that feels embarrassed by this, the only reason I know that Black people's hair is different, this is going to, I feel like there's a part of me that is like, you're
Just say
such an
it. This
idiot.
is
Okay.
how we learn.
Okay. Is that like so my husband was a pastor for a couple of years and he was a pastor
Hmm.
at a church in Louisiana. So this means
Okay.
I was probably 30. Okay,
Hmm.
30. And we went on a canoe trip with a bunch of people in our church. And our church was mostly a Black church.
Hmm.
And we went on a canoe trip. And one family, a Black family, their canoe flipped over. And
Mm.
the mom was really upset because her hair got wet.
Hmm.
And then the next day in church had like her hair up and was upset about her hair but it was like kind of funny and fun and we're all talking about it. And I remember, this is so weird that I remember this, but I remember being like, why are you upset you got your hair wet? And having a conversation with her
Hmm.
about, it's not the same as I get my hair wet. And it was like,
It's
and I was,
not.
no, it's not. And we had fun and all this stuff, but it was like the first time she'd
Hmm.
ever been in a canoe and was
Hmm.
like, and I remember it being like, she can't have fun because she's upset about her hair. And yeah, and I was 30. And that's the only reason I
Hmm.
know is because that was my first experience with someone
Hmm.
Black who had gotten their hair wet
Hmm.
or had,
I'm
right?
curious if like her hair was relaxed or if it was natural, because those two things being wet looks different. So like,
Oh,
if I know for me, like if my hair got wet when it was relaxed, I knew that I had to now wash it, do a roller set, sit under the dryer, and wrap it so that it's dry again or like straight. And then if it's natural and I have the right products with me, then I can just do a wash and go. But regardless of the two, this takes time.
yeah.
No one wants to do their hair for 2-3 hours to
No,
get it back to the way that it was. Well, maybe not 2-3 hours at this point, because I've gotten better. I would say maybe like 30 minutes. But even then, that's a lot.
it is a
And I
lot.
don't know, does it take you 30 minutes to get your
No.
hair? Right.
Well, no. I mean, I think that it could. I mean, I think there are
Hmm.
plenty of people that spend that much time on their hair, but
Well,
not
let me
me.
rephrase my question. Like, so like, let's say, worst case scenario, your canoe flipped over and your hair got wet. Would you be upset for the rest of the day? Okay. Right.
No, and it wouldn't have made it. Then the next day, it wouldn't have made any difference. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like I could wash my hair and
Hmm.
5 minutes be fine. Like,
Hmm.
yeah,
And I think that's the disconnect. It wouldn't take her
yeah,
5 minutes to just be fine. I feel like IFS has made this road to personal development more realistic and doable for me, because now I'm no longer looking at this end goal as I've arrived. I think that like the way that I parallel it, or like the way that it makes sense in my mind, is like, again, thinking back to school. You go to school for something for, I don't know, 4 years if it's undergrad, grad school, PhD, whatever, and it ends. There's an
Mm,
end to whatever the program is. If you, I don't know, join a team, like the season ends at a certain time. Personal development doesn't.
yeah.
I don't think that we're ever finished, which is not a bad thing. I feel like at every level, there's something different for you to learn, and then you progress. And then there's another thing that you need to learn, and then you progress. But I don't think that it ever ends. And one of the things that I struggled with when I was younger was feeling like, when does it end?
Mm,
Or like, once I do this thing, then I'm fine. And then something else comes up, and it's
right.
just like, this is a lot. This is a lot. Like, is this going to be forever? Like, I can't do this forever. Like, I need to know when it ends. And now it's just like, it's not. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with it.
Yeah. How has IFS helped with that?
I feel like it's helped me, and my therapist and I talk about this all the time. It's helped me not have this polarizing idea that I have to be either or.
Okay.
Like, IFS helps me be in the gray area and be okay with gray, because
Mm.
things are not black and white. Things are not either or.
We have parts that want them to be, for sure. I
Right.
think I do.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I definitely do. I definitely do. And that polarization is not healthy.
Yeah.
For me, it hasn't been.
Yeah. Well, and I love when you said flexibility too, because I was like, yeah, the more flexible I can be, okay, I guess that's what it is, right? Because it's those
Mm-hmm.
parts that are polarized, sort of those
Mm-hmm.
all or nothing, or it has to be this way, or
Mm-hmm.
um, that if there could be self is flexible. So if I could bring
Right,
self to
right.
those parts, then I'm kind of shifting my body a little bit. There's sort of
Mm-hmm.
more flexibility, a little more flow to those
Mm-hmm.
parts, and then their whole system kind of eases up with the flexibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, duality
Yeah.
is the word that comes up for me when I think about flexibility. Like, I can be upset about something, or someone that I love can say something that makes me feel upset. Not makes me, but I feel upset by what they said, and I can
Yeah.
still love them.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
because I feel upset doesn't mean that, like, now I hate you.
Yeah. Do you know, I don't know that I really learned that again until I was in my 30s. Because it was like, if I'm mad at you, then you're
Hmm.
out. Bye. Like,
Right,
you were out.
right.
That was
And
it.
I'm from New York. I'm from the Bronx, New York. When I was younger, I feel like, and I used to say this, like, oh, I'm the queen of cutting you off. And it's just like, sis, that's not something to be proud of.
Yeah.
I don't think
Aw.
that's something to be proud of. Like, I think that there's beauty in mending. I think that it's
Mm,
important to talk about things. Um, Boundaries are important, and yes, we all need to have them, because some people don't recognize them or have them themselves. And I
yeah.
think it's important to protect yourself. But I also think that when you mend a relationship, that you learn and you grow from whatever that conflict or tension was. And there's a lesson in that. You don't have to cut everybody off.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, and the reality is that, like, as a people, we're communal. So, like, if you're out here just cutting everybody off, who's left?
Yeah. Aw. Yeah. Right. So it's like you're safe. One of my friends says, yeah, you could be right alone in a field. Like yeah,
Mm,
so you're by yourself. You're right. Go ahead. You can be the person that's right, or
mm-hmm,
you can cut everybody off, and then you'll be alone in a field. I don't know where she got that from, but
mm-hmm.
she got it from.
No,
But I
I
love
get
that
it.
idea. Right. That's right. I can be like, fine. I can be safe. Right. So that's what cutting off, I think, is often like that makes me safe. Fine. You hurt
Mm-hmm,
me in some way, then I cut you off. Now I'm safe. But now I'm alone in
mm-hmm,
a field by myself, but I'm
mm-hmm.
safe. For me, that's what it's often about.
Right. So it's like, at what expense? Like, how far are you willing to go to be right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that as the older that I get, it's like, okay, I don't think that for me being right is the goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I can know that I'm right, and
Yeah. I know.
if I am, I can know that I'm right and still mend.
Yeah. I actually love when I'm like, I feel like there's this little bit of a bratty 13-year-old in me that comes out sometimes. It's like, I'll know I'm right, but I'll just let you sit there and think that you're right. And I'm like, okay. Like sort of like, so I'm not gonna engage with you, but I know that I'm right, and I'll just gonna sit back and be like, okay.
And there's so much peace in that. I think for me, there's so much peace in that because I feel like we need to question, well, what does it mean for you to be right?
Mm,
I know for me, that was like a big thing in therapy. Well, what does it mean for you to be right? And it's like, I hate when she asked me, or my therapist asked me that question. I'm just like, look, stop that.
yeah.
But she's right. And I'm just
Yeah,
like, well,
exactly.
what
Yeah.
does it mean for me to be right? If you know that you're good at something or you know that you're correct about something, all that matters truthfully is that you know it.
Yeah.
The world doesn't have to agree.
Right. Um, or that IFS question to that part of you. Like what is that part afraid would happen if you weren't
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, are you asking?
No. Well, I mean I could
Oh.
be, but yes, I am asking.
I mean, I think for me it was and another part comes up about like just being afraid of not being smart. So like knowing meant that I was smart. Being correct meant that I was smart. And then
Yeah.
as I'm getting
Okay.
older, is like being smart to me now means that I'm still open to learning. Because to
Mm,
me, to be right, or the way that I think about it, to be right is to just be correct and it ends there.
yeah.
And now when I think about like personal development and flexibility, learning never ends. There's so much that I do not know.
Right.
And that's
Okay.
okay.
So, but does okay, so can I ask you this question? So
Sure.
then if so to be right means that I'm smart, and then does that keep me safe or does it keep me disconnected? Like what does smart do for me?
I think that like what smart did for me was please my mom in some ways. Like this whole education thing, like I know.
Yeah.
And that was I think her thing about
Yeah.
like going to school because when I think back, like I never like I knew the importance of college, but I didn't see it as the only out. Like initially I had a lot of dreams. I wanted to join the military at one point. And because I'm a woman, my mom was like, hell no, you're not going to go kill yourself. Like, no.
Yeah.
As long as I have breath in my body, like that's not gonna happen. And being the oldest, I feel like the way it I feel like my mom's thinking has shifted because my brother joined the military.
Wow.
She still
Okay.
gave him hell, but I feel like seeing me initially bring it up and then not going, like it wasn't the first time around that she was hearing it at this point, and it was just kind of like he did it. So I had the relaxer when I was like what 6, and then Denise never had one. So like
Right.
things shifted with the kids. Um,
You
but
had
yeah,
to suffer the
school.
most.
Oh my goodness, that's another podcast for another day. But she I feel like education was her thing. Okay, so yeah, I was talking about dreams. I wanted to join the military at one point. When I was younger, I wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to have like a chain of hair salons. I
Oh.
wanted to be president of the United States, but only part time.
Oh,
Oh, only part time, only
yeah.
part time.
I
Because
think it's a
I had a
part-time gig.
business to run.
Yeah. We're both giving
um,
each other looks, so
like yeah,
yeah.
the look.
Yeah.
I wanted to have schools in Honduras to teach people English
Mm,
so that they can be multilingual and have resources and access. I remember when I was younger, I I had a lot of because I used to be in ESL and ESL was English as a second language. So I would take the ESL sheets and translate them and make copies of them because I wanted to teach the kids in Honduras or in our
wow.
village English so that when they came to the United States, it would be easier for them. I'm like, what
Wow.
9-year-old is doing this?
That's amazing.
What 9-year-old is doing this?
I love that. I feel
Yeah.
like you okay, so let's go back to this. So this idea then that if you're right, that equals you're smart, and then if you're smart, then that helps you connect with mom, or something about being smart and your mom
Mm-hmm.
that's really related. That was
Mm-hmm.
valued as the oldest child, like being smart and kind of being on was it like being on mom's good side or being in mom's favor or something about mom?
I think for me, I mean, and even now in some ways, like my mom has had a rough life, I would say. Like when I think of me at 33 and my mom at 33, like if I were to meet the 33-year-old version of my mom, like she and I would not have shit in common. Like, sorry, I cursed.
You're okay. That's okay.
We wouldn't like. I wouldn't see myself being friends with her. Like at that point, she had 3 kids. I don't have any. I have a master's degree. My mom doesn't. And it's not to say that I can't be friends with someone who doesn't have a master's degree and doesn't have children, or who does have children. But like, we need to connect in some way. And her experience is just vastly different from mine. Yeah. So I think that for me growing up, it felt like as the oldest, I have to be the one to set the example. And I don't want to be the one to make my mom's life more difficult. So being smart meant, okay, now things are getting easier.
Wow.
I want things to be easier for you. Now at my expense is like, you do know that this isn't your burden or your legacy burden to carry. Like this isn't yours.
Yes.
This isn't yours. There has to be a way for you to connect with your mom. There has to be a way for you to have a relationship with her where it doesn't feel guilt. It doesn't come from a place of guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the little younger parts of you learned that just non-verbally, right? We pick that stuff up. It's legacy burdens that we're carrying. And you've learned that as the oldest child, my mom's life's hard. I need to make sure that it's easy, and it's easier if I'm smart. Like being a smart girl makes it easier for my mom.
And my siblings call me the goody one. Like, I don't fight back, or at least not with her, or I didn't. And I don't even call it fighting, but like, I think that with me, my mom and I are able to like ease through conflict. Then with the others, it's just like a fight every single time. And I'm just like, you do know that shit does not have to be difficult. Like address it. And if the way that I look at it is there's just certain things that my mom will not do. And then I just kind of take the L.
Yeah.
Like, all right, fine, whatever. And it'll just get done. And then I'll figure out what I need to do on the back end for me.
Right.
But there's always this undertone of how can I make this easy for you? This is a great conversation.
Oh, good. I'm having a great time. Good. I'm so glad. It's so funny how we're talking about our mom, talk about hair, and then we're talking about our moms, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can just so relate to so much that you're saying. Like hair brings up moms, and yeah. So the last question, which I think is going to be a great question for you, is if you weren't doing what you're doing, which is like which I know is you're a therapist, you're an IFS therapist, what would you do? Which I feel like you've already answered that, but sort of thinking of that now, like if you weren't doing all the stuff you're doing, what would you do?
I'm looking at my hammock, and I will probably be laying on one, but not on my little patio. It would be on the beach somewhere. Which is why I got a hammock, because I'm like, it's not like I can get to the beach, but I'm not going to pout about not being there. So I'll just have a hammock. Yeah. But yeah, that's probably what I would be doing.
Yeah, laying on a hammock on a beach somewhere with some palm trees. Well, that's why you have your pineapple tree.
Yeah, my little pineapple tree. Yeah, I think that's what I would be doing. Like one of the things that I love, where I feel like myself is just more present, is when I'm at the beach. Yeah. And I would love to just be on a hammock on different beaches. Thank you so much, Tammy. This was amazing. This was good.
So good. All right, good. I'm so glad. Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time. Today's episode was sponsored by Brighter Vision. What's the point of having a beautiful website if it doesn't attract the clients you want to see? As the worldwide leaders of website design for therapists, Brighter Vision sees this issue happen way too often. A nice-looking website doesn't equate to a successful website. The truth is, your current website might even be turning off potential clients. That's where Brighter Vision comes in. Brighter Vision's team of website designers will create a website that is centered around attracting and retaining your ideal client so that you can have a nice-looking website as well as a successful one. Better yet, Brighter Vision is offering $100 off exclusively for listeners of the One Inside podcast. To take advantage of this offer, simply go to brightervision.com/inside. Again, that's brightervision.com/inside.